Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello, and welcome back to the number one homeschool podcast in North Seattle. And what's the best way, Ariel, for the people to see the number one podcast in person?
June 21st from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Snohomish Library. If you've been listening the last few weeks, you're like, yes, we heard it. And if you don't live in Washington, sorry about that. But if you do, at the Snohomish City Library, we are going to be there. We're going to be having a talk. It's going to be fun. Come hang out. Meet us.
It's going to be like a homeschool rave party.
I just want to... Hey, I got recognized at school the other week, which was super exciting.
A fire extinguisher is like welcoming us in like it's a WWE event or something.
Somebody was
like
like, do you have a YouTube channel at school the other day? I'm like, yes, I do. Our parent partnership. So that was pretty exciting. So yeah, come see us in person. We would love to meet you. We'd love to hear about your families and your homeschool journeys. And I'm super duper excited about it.
Yeah. WWE entrance. That would be awesome. The Flames.
No, oh my gosh.
I went to one when I was in high school. It was like the Flames. You could feel the heat. Glass breaks.
You don't mean a talk at the library? It was like that. I mean actual WWE.
Glass breaks. My gosh, is that Homeschool Together's music?
We're like 1 minute in, we already have sports.
I would say wrestling is an art form. Ariel, how can we build lifelong learners?
Right. So we just wanted to talk about, we've talked about tests, we've talked about learning as a family, printing, and we've just talked about a lot of things. And, you know, we're both going through our masters right now. And so it really kind of hit home for us like, oh, you know, we're lifelong learners, and that's certainly what we want to grow our kids into. Yeah. You know, I mean, the benefits of being a lifelong learner, obviously it's the personal growth, right? We continue to develop. We want to develop new skills and interests and hobbies. It really encourages this growth mindset. So we want to see things, challenges as like obstacles we can overcome. We don't want to be defeatist. We want to, know how to learn. We want to be adaptable. Things change all the time. You know, there's new situations in the world. There's new technology, like I keep convincing my mom, come on, Mom, be a lifelong learner. You can figure out how to use that phone, and I just feel like not everyone's mindset's there. I know this is kind of not the way my folks especially are not really lifelong learners, and they really struggle to like pick up something new or to be flexible or adapt to changing situations. They're like, no, this is the way it's always been. It's like, well, okay, but things change, and we've got to learn something new, learn a new way to do something, or a new system or process or whatever. So that adaptability is also super crucial.
Yeah, I mean, even on the podcast, we need to adapt to, you're going to become the TikTok star.
Oh my God, I don't even have TikTok. I could not. I can't.
The kids are all on the TikToks.
It's true though. Like you talk about like how many people actually went. Actually do at 40, let's say, or even at 30, how many people actually do what they went to college for? Like,
nope.
Right? Most of us make some sort of career pivot at some point. Now, you're still maybe in the same sphere, but we certainly did. We've had to reinvent our careers a couple of times to different things.
And the funny thing is we've known, we have some good friends, and he pivoted from culinary into software programming, like late in his 20s, had to make that pivot. And, we see that a lot of times, and it's not just within the tech world or this, we see people like my mom. She went from, being kind of a human resources person to like running a medical practice to then pivoting back into culinary and then coming back into medical. It's like we all know people in our lives that have made, dramatic changes or even subtle changes. There's a lot of people who, like, I would say like myself, where like I went to a STEM field, and then I kind of went into electrical engineering, science, and then I got into software. And
kind of went into management.
And then I kind of went almost into management level from the starting point
Right.
of a
But
physics
more
degree.
like project management.
Yeah,
even.
in a lot of respects, yeah, a lot of that. And we can either make really sharp changes where we say, hey, I want to become a teacher, to take an example of right now. But some of us may, instead of making huge step changes, parallel, pivoting, that type of thing, some of us just arc slowly over time in different directions. We end up finding our interest. We end up finding what we do really well at.
Right. How well do you know at 18 what you do really well?
No.
I mean, I think the people that do are incredibly fortunate because most of us, we have an idea of something that interests us, we think looks cool, and, we go into that. But then you're right. We settle into wherever we're going to be. And, the number of people I know right now that are going back to school or thinking about going back to school to completely change their careers, it's like I could count more than one hand, right? A number of people that are going back and doing something like that. Or if I go to the number of people that are changing careers in the last year, people we know, we don't have that big a friend circle. There's like a dozen people that are all made some sort of shift away from what they were doing to something else. Especially with the rise of AI, we don't know exactly how that's going to change jobs in the future, right? We definitely have to be more adaptable, but that might mean that something you go to school for at some point has to pivot to something else because that's now being done in a different way than it was before because of AI. We're at a really steep slope of innovation and advancement, and that's going to mean we need to be adaptable, and we need to raise our children to be very adaptable.
Well, especially around the problem solving skills and kind of juxtaposed against that kind of fulfillment and joy, like we talked about, like people finding what is interesting to them, but then also having those skills to say, okay, I can solve these problems, I can pivot who I am, and I can adapt into something new. But beyond that, it's we as adults, as mentors, we need to basically, model that lifelong learning. I think, it's hard for our students because, as we get older, we can look back on our childhood and we have that wisdom of time, reflecting through what we do. But our students don't have that perspective. And I always make the joke, sports analogy, but
always.
I always remember like my coaches who were in their 40s looking at me and going, oh my gosh, you have so much potential. You could do so much if you just did this extra stuff and all these things. And, I was a 14, 15-year-old kid. I'm like, I don't care. I'm just playing and having fun and everything. And both situations are correct, right? The younger person should be having fun. They should be enjoying themselves. And also the older person does have that. It's almost like they're projecting a little bit of regret or missed opportunity on their own part. And I think if we model that behavior of learning and understanding, it will help our students know that is something that should be valued. Not that it should be like everything. We got to be thinking about, where am I going to be in 40 years? But understanding that they have the power and the tools to pivot and change, to make good decisions, and know that those decisions aren't going to affect 50 years down the line, that you can pivot and adapt. And even if you make mistakes, you can get yourself back up, rebuild, dig yourself out of the hole and move forward. And I think the only way they know that is possible is that the people around them let them know, either by telling them or also, I think the best way is to model that behavior.
Right. We got to show them that. One of the traits of lifelong learners is curiosity. So we need to be curious ourselves, right? We show an interest in a wide range of topics, even if they're outside of our comfort zone. And then we got to share discoveries with our kids. So, oh my gosh, I just found out about this. This is super interesting. I didn't know this before. Being curious when we're out and about, we're going on trips and things with our kids and showing them what we're learning. Or I think it's also really great to show them, when we're making a pivot to something else, right? We need to learn something else, to approach that something with enthusiasm and genuine curiosity, right? There's plenty of times where we have to learn something and we're like, oh man, I don't want to have to learn this right now. But if we can model learning that in a way that is curious and interested in what we're going to learn, not just like, oh, I've got to learn how to do this thing,
I was also wondering, like, because we tend to focus on early learners, because we have early learners, a lot of our listeners have early learners, that there's a benefit there of them learning those skills early on. and that's not something we're going to try and instill to them in maybe like late middle school or high school. It's harder to make those changes when we become a little bit more, ossified in that respect, where it's like we're stuck and more rigid in our thinking. When those young kids are very moldable and they're very, they can adapt and change and learn different things, it's a great time for us to make this part of the ethos that they live in on a day-to-day, so they can, begin to intuit that type of thinking.
Right. And we can be curious too, not just about things that are happening for us, but also things that they tell us, right? When they've learned something interesting, something they're excited about, that we can share that genuine curiosity. Tell me more about that. Tell me all about that dinosaur. What were the things? Well, why did it do that? I mean, some of it can be a bit feigned, but we try to be as genuine as we can and try to take interest in the things that our kids are interested in and show that curiosity, because I think that really shines through.
Yeah. The other week, the Land of Stories scenario.
Yeah. You like sat for 30 minutes.
I did not know what I walked myself into.
And listened to her just go on and on about this book she was really passionate about, and you were like curious about it. And she felt so like validated by that. When I saw her later, she was like, "Oh, I told Dad all about my story, Mom. I told him about everything. He's all caught up and he knows everything." She was really excited that you took the interest to sit and listen and stay curious. So I think that was a really great win. I
think also embracing mistakes. I think showcasing that perfection isn't the end goal, that mistakes are okay. I think that's a life lesson, especially a lot of us can be perfectionists, to kind of put yourself out there and say, well, listen, Daddy's made mistakes too. Here's some good examples of that.
Or here's how I overcame challenges.
Yeah. It's not really, I never like to dwell on the mistake. I always like to dwell on the recovery. It's always the action. Like the mistake happens. Like, you always say, oh, I didn't do well, or wasn't successful here, but, we took it as an opportunity to get better. And this is what I did. And, being able to see that. And again, going back to that idea of modeling what to do in mistakes, I think can help. I think that's one of the unique things about human beings, is that we can actually learn through sharing and learn through stories. I think that's why stories are so popular, is that when we listen to stories, we can actually learn life lessons through those stories without actually having to experience it. Sort of that maybe goes back to like sitting around the fire and, Ugg telling the story about the lion, and we're all like, yeah, Ugg, that's smart. Next time I see a lion, I ain't going to go there. Right? Like we can all learn that way. And I think that learning through mistakes, telling stories, telling what happened to you, it's almost like indistinguishable from telling them a story, right? Like, Mommy did this. Oh, really? And that's the same as Pinkalicious making a mistake over here, right?
Pinkalicious makes a lot of mistakes.
Pinkalicious makes a lot of mistakes.
But yeah, I think it's great. Whenever our daughters come up against a challenge, if I can connect it in any way to a challenge that we've had in the past and like how we met that, and it's okay to challenge, it's okay to struggle, right? I know that our daughters have sometimes, especially our older daughter, she really beats up on herself when she struggles with something.
She really does, yeah.
And so it's really important for us to just be constantly talking about like, it's okay to be challenged. It's okay to struggle. I think that's really important. I also think what's really important to do to encourage lifelong learning is to be very visible. We want them to see us learning. So we always have a book. We got a book on our Kindle. We have the book on our phone. We're always trying to learn something new or pick up a new hobby. And we don't shy away from that with our kids. We really try to keep that really visible. I've been working on playing piano lately. And so the girls are like, oh, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to pick up this stuff with the piano. Girls, I've always wanted to learn this or whatever. And they're like, huh, okay. Because I kind of think, sometimes they think like, oh, at your age, you're still trying to learn things, right? Like, I think they're not that surprised by us now, but especially like when your mom or dad does it, your mom will be like, oh yeah, I'm trying to learn this thing. The girls are like, really?
Yeah, right.
Oh, Grandma's trying to learn this? Okay. I think that's great to be just visible. We're watching documentaries or we're excited about something that we're sharing pieces of it as we can with them.
And also, setting goals. I think modeling that, the good behavior.
Our goals, right?
Our goals are, Daddy wants to sit down. Like sometimes when I draw with our youngest, a lot of times I will look and say, Daddy's looking for a reference piece of art that I can draw. And my daughter's like, why? Why would you want to do that? I said, well, this is what I can practice and this type of stuff. And, I'll pull up an image and take a screenshot and then, or print it off or something, and we'll work side by side. And a lot of times she'll she'll be like, why do you want to learn that? And I'll be, well, I want to get better at drawing these type of characters, or I want to get better at drawing, making these type of shading things. And she goes, really? Well, show me how to do that. And I said, okay, well, here's how I'm doing it. And then I smudge it with my thumb and this and that. And you can see how it creates kind of a darker area here, a lighter area over here. And she's like, oh, okay. So like she sees that I'm like, I have goals that I'm trying to set and that I'm trying to get better at things. And even as they get older, we can start to maybe go into more depth about, how we think about our goals, not just a singular thing like, oh, I'm working out so that I can get better at this activity or these type of things, or I'm learning 3D printing so that I can be better at making these types of things, or I want to do modeling because I want to get into making, my own D&D characters, or daddy's into Warhammer 40K or whatever. I'm totally not. But you've been that's doing a good example of that, right?
Yeah, but you've been doing these different like reading cycles of books on different famous parts of history, and the girls are like, what are you reading now, Dad? And you're like, well, okay, I covered this section, now I'm reading about this part. And I think that stuff's really great. And I think there's some part of learning at some point could become like embarrassing, right? That you're really geeking out about something, you're really into it. And I think by showing them that, yeah, we're really into things too, and it's cool. And, so I don't want there to be a point where our girls are really into something and they try to share that with their friends, and their friends are like, what? You're into what? And then they feel embarrassed about their desire to learn something. So I'm hoping that by us modeling like, yeah, we're really excited about this. I know it seems silly, but it's really cool, that they can feel like the space and the freedom to pursue something that they're interested in, even if, nobody else is into it.
Absolutely. Now, we'll go into a little bit about maybe just some techniques, and not all of these will work and not all of them are perfect, but you might find one or two that you may want to implement and give it a try. The first one that I have seen a lot of times is this idea of the growth mindset. And it's almost, I would say almost, it's kind of like a radical positivity, in a lot of respect, because like the university that I'm going through has this as kind of a core ethos within the core mindset that they always push. Even at the beginning of every class, they kind of reiterate the importance of the growth mindset. And I've skimmed through like a dozen times now. I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm positive. Yeah, sure. I'm moving forward. But it is kind of interesting. Like, I think the key is, and we kind of went back to it with the mistakes, is really embracing the failure, embracing the opportunity, staying positive, having your goals, moving forward.
Praising the effort, not the outcome, right? See how hard you're working on
They're big on celebrating the effort and celebrating the accomplishments, whether they're small or large, as a way to motivate yourself moving forward. And something to build against when you do have a tough time or a couple tough moments. That you're able to reference those good times and those good experiences and able to pick yourself up and kind of move forward. So really having this kind of an idea of growth mindset that I'm constantly seeking something, better. I'm constantly trying to learn. I'm constantly trying to move forward as kind of like a core of your homeschool. It doesn't have to be so cliche and so...
No, it can be very genuine.
It can be very genuine and very kind of subtle in a lot of respects, but just that kind of that positivity just kind of leaching through everything, I think is a good way to start.
Appreciating the effort and
Absolutely.
Showing the mistakes as really opportunities that we can learn from. I think it's great. The next one is to provide a really wide range of learning opportunities. So this is all this is the strewing. This is your permission to go and buy all the books, and the art kits and the science, sets and whatever. Grow your own crystals, whatever it is. So having lots of really great learning materials all around our house that are really going to spark their curiosity, and then following where they lead, right? What are they interested in learning, and how can we support that? Because I remember this being a thing in school, right? Where I love to read, and then I started reading books that, of course, they told you to read, and they suddenly weren't good books anymore. And I was like, okay. And I kind of got through one, I got through two. Eventually, it got to the point where I couldn't read anything I wanted to read. And so I just got bogged down, and then I just didn't read anymore. Yeah. I didn't read anymore until college, like not for fun. Like I stopped reading in, I want to say 7th grade, and I didn't read again until I was in college, because everything I read was something somebody told me I had to read, and I didn't want to read any of it.
Did you have summer reading as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah, it was like assigned summer reading that had to have reports on when I got back to
we had like 7 or 8 books that we had to read through the summer.
It was horrible.
Yeah, it
right?
was like I had to crank through a book every couple weeks, and it was like
Right.
it wasn't even just that we had to read books that we didn't enjoy or maybe were a little bit more stuffy. It was that there was never an opportunity to pick up anything else. And it was like my time was always taken up. I couldn't just read for pleasure.
Yeah, we had no time, and we kept reading books that, I don't know, this was the 90s, so, but we kept reading.
The dream of the 90s is alive in Portland.
we kept reading these books where horrible things happened to women, and I just, when I got, at some point, I had gotten through so many of these books, and I'm like, I just can't read about another tragic, horrible thing that's happened to this woman heroine. I just can't do any more of these. So at some point it was really rough, but I think that's why it's so important for us. And we have, we have the great privilege in our homeschools to be able to support our kids with the books they want to read, but not just the books, the subjects that they're interested in studying. If there's something that they're interested in, it doesn't mean that we set aside our math and reading permanently, but we've got to find room to fit in that thing that they're really into, whatever it is, and try to foster that, because that it's not just about that thing. Our daughter's into making spa products. Okay? so it's, it's like, oh, okay, that's silly. Do we need to make another hand lotion? Or whatever it is, dry shampoo or whatever. But it's something she's really into. And you know what? In 2 months, she might be really into something different.
Yeah.
But I want her to remember at that point that whatever the last thing was, that mom and dad are not going to laugh, that they're going to support her. She got super into survival stuff for a while.
Still is. Oh my gosh.
Is.
We had the rainstorm that came through.
Oh, she totally prepared us.
I told her, I said, hey, sweetie, mommy and daddy need your help. She goes, what do you need my help for? I said, we might be losing power and we need to set up for a little bit of survival. She goes, stop everything.
Oh, yeah.
I have prepared for this.
Oh my gosh, she had flashlights and candles.
She had her tablet out. She made like a whole list and was handwriting things. I can't beg her to write anything with her by hand.
Oh, she wrote this whole like list for the survival. Yeah, it was great.
We were set.
And when she got into that, the first thing that you did was you were like, hey, let's learn first aid. And you got all these supplies and you guys made first aid kits, and she started reading books on survival, and you started reading books to her on, survival stories. And, she started planning and prepping and doing all these cool things, and she was super into it. And we just went with it. And she's, a little into it now. She comes back in, but now she's kind of moved on to other things that she's interested in. Yep. But if we can support them in the stuff that they're really into in whatever capacity we're able to, I think that just goes a long way.
Yeah. That's, I going with that is like the learning activities. I love that. And then obviously the, the learning rich environment that you talked about, having everything kind of, there. So different strategies, having an environment that kind of supports that, are kind of like a double-edged, thing that you can use to drive through any interest. But, exploring beyond the curriculum, kind of what you said, I think is another powerful idea for you to begin to think about that, because you're right. Like their interests, things that they may be, our oldest is kind of into marketing right now. And I wanted to get her into do a little bit of writing and activities and think about graphic design and using the computer. And I was like, man, I can have her just design a cereal box and just have like her glue paper on the outside of a cereal box. And man, that was like 2 or 3 hours of effort. She just like locked in. She was writing scripts on the back of the paper, and then she was typing it into the computer. And I was like, I got a lot of amazing learning out of that, because I leveraged something that she was kind of interested in. It's something that's maybe kind of a little passionate about her. And I'm thinking now inside my head, gosh, how can I do another one of these? How can I do, some other independent learning, experience or whatever it might be to get her to read more and write more and craft and think of design and think of colors and art and kind of mix them all together. And also using the computer, using online programs to make all those things. Like I'm being able to leverage all these skills into this interest that she has. And she would never have gotten a marketing, effort in a 3rd grade classroom. They would have some,
No,
maybe they might do some art project or some type of project that might be aligned to that. But I got writing in, and I got, critical thinking, and I got her to think about the design and plan things out and build and do art and work on the computer and technology. And it was a great way for me to leverage all these other skills that I wanted her to learn through the singular passion of what she
Right.
was interested in.
Well, I think that's great. Leveraging technology is a terrific way to help encourage lifelong learning because, well, first of all, technology is constantly changing. So we need to teach them the skills to, use computer or tablets or whatever it is and learn new programs, but also how to research and look up things that they're interested in learning about.
A lot of real world skills right there. Yeah.
Yeah. As much as we can connect the stuff that we're doing with our homeschool into something real world, you did that marketing project. It was for a cereal box. And you went to the store and you looked at a bunch of cereal boxes. How did they market these? And how do they, and that was something she could see and touch, right?
Yeah.
And then she got to sit down at the computer and she's learning how to use a mouse and she's learning how to use Canva and all that stuff. It's great. If we can leverage technology, if we can find some way to connect it to something in our everyday life, whether we're going to teach them skills around the house, whether it's cooking or sewing or, it's funny. Our kids are even interested in home maintenance. When we do something for the house it could be something really silly, like I'm fixing the handle on the toilet or something like that. They're all there. They want to know, how is this happening? Right. They're really interested. Or, we've had to do a few things lately and I've been watching, the first thing to do nowadays is watch a YouTube video. How do I fix this thing? Well, let me watch a YouTube video. And the kids are right there. Okay. They're watching a YouTube video. And our older daughter's all right, Mom. The guy said, this is the first thing we got to do. Okay. Do you have the right tools? We got to get the right tools. And so it's cool because it's you're teaching them something practical. If they were going to have to do this, this is what they would also do. And my hope is that they are less helpless when they get out as adults than I was. Because I felt like I was so clueless. I didn't know how to do anything. I mean, I barely knew how to cook. As you can attest, my cooking in the beginning was really bad.
No, it was wonderful.
No, it was
Growth mindset.
Terrible. It's terrible. I didn't know how to cook.
I was a decent cook.
You were always a fine cook. You definitely were totally passable. I always tried to be too much flair. Anyways, I digress. But I just felt like we were kind of helpless. We didn't know how to take care of a house. When we got our first house, we were we had no idea what we were doing. We didn't know anything about how to set a thermostat or take care of a water heater or any of the stuff you got to do in a house, or when something breaks, or how to install blinds. I mean, it's just simple stuff. And it's one of the things I love about homeschool is that our kids are with us and we can take them, hey kids, let's go to Lowe's. Well, why? Well, we got to get this part, the part to do this thing, and you're going to help me fix it later. And that's all, we feel like it's practical learning, which is great. And it's time together and all that stuff, but it's also encouraging lifelong learning at the same time. So take your kids to Lowe's.
Well, a lot of that stuff, if you think about it, what those activities meant when we were younger, it took a lot of headspace. And when we were, having to do schoolwork, or when we were, having to, establish ourselves in our careers and stuff. And we're also having to stress about these other things, or you could almost say we end up spending a lot of money going out to eat. And maybe if we made some more, food at home, that would have been better. Maybe we didn't have to pay $500 for a plumber to fix something. I could have just fixed that myself. Those type of skills, kind of what you're talking about. I think when they go out into the real world, they have a lot more confidence in who they are, when they first start out, and it's not such a panic. You can get into an apartment. Well, did you know you need renter's insurance? And no, I didn't know that. I was oh my gosh.
I was what is first last? I didn't understand.
Yeah, what is first and
what's a
last?
security deposit? I had no idea. And I'm not expecting for them to know all these things.
No.
But hopefully we've given them the skills to go out and find them, and the confidence to know that they can find the information. Even if they don't know it now, hey, I know I can figure this out. That self-sufficiency is what I'm really hoping for.
Yeah, one day they're not going to need us, and that's going to be sad. It's going to be sad.
You know what? I think even if you know these things, you always need your parents. I mean, I still need my mom and dad. You still need your dad. You do. It's it's a thing. So I don't think that hurts that at all. And the last thing is celebrating achievements, right? Big achievements, small achievements. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's involved with learning, it's part of that positivity that I think you talked about. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day,
reinforcement that has our youngest is learning the piano all by herself. She just does it.
She just really wants to learn
she
really
just wants
badly.
To learn. And she'll be like, "Oh, Daddy, I want to learn this new song that I have that's preset on the keyboard." And she plays it.
It's Fleur-Elise.
Fleur-Elise. And I go, "Okay, well, let me dial up a YouTube short real quick and see if I can get the notes or even just the numerical, like, oh, key 1, key 2, key 3, that type of thing." And that girl had that thing locked down within, a minute or two.
You showed her the first couple bars, and then I was like, oh, here's the next couple bars. And I just taught her in the morning before work. I played it twice, and now she can play the whole second line.
And it's just like, she did that because we were celebrating her accomplishment of playing like 5 or 6 notes.
Right. We were like,
she goes,
wow,
well,
great job.
I'm going to go and learn the next 5, and I'm going to go learn the next 5, and then I'm going to keep practicing it. And that positive reinforcement of celebrating the accomplishments, I think, is great. Like, our oldest is playing volleyball right now, and she's been doing really well. We practice a lot, and I always am giving good positive feedback on that. And because of that, it's like, oh, she wants to play and she wants to practice. And same thing with her reading and everything, is just maintaining that positivity, I think, and celebrating those achievements, I think, is amazing.
Yeah, and not in a fake way, certainly, but just in a genuine way, like, wow, hey, nice job there. Or, we'll be out walking or driving the car or something, and our oldest will read a sign, and I'm like, good going.
Yeah,
it can be just small things, but
praise the effort too.
Yeah.
I think it's as much as we sometimes want to praise the achievement. I sometimes always remember, somebody told me that once, is, praising achievement's great and everything, but really, if you want to incentivize achievement, you'll praise the achievement. If you want to incentivize the action, you praise the action. And so when they like work really hard at something, changing your words from, wow, that sounded great, to, wow, you really worked really hard on that. And because of that, it sounded great.
Yeah. We like to say things like when they play games, when they play basketball. I remember like every basketball game I ever played, which was just like Parks and Rec basketball. It wasn't anything big, but I remember every game on the way home, my dad would tell me everything that I didn't do right. And he wasn't trying to be negative. He was just like, oh, next time you need to do this, next time you need to do this. And I always just felt like it like weighed me down, because I had a really fun time playing.
Yeah, right.
So we always try to say things to our kids like, I loved watching you play today. That was really fun to see how much fun you were having out there. Like that kind of stuff. And then, when we're practicing later in the week, we can be like, hey, let's work on these things. But not like right after. It's just, I try really hard not to make corrections then, but just to celebrate like, hey, you did a thing and it was cool. And I can see how hard you worked at it, or I can see how much fun you had. So I think that's really, really important. And I have to remind myself, because I have a tendency to go, oh, next time you should do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, we can get kind of locked into that. A couple ideas on how to sustain that lifelong learning, even into adulthood, I think is the big thing. So, we talked a little bit about goals. I think maybe at this younger years, maybe seeing that you set goals is really important. I don't know how much we need to be doing goal setting for super young kids. Maybe short-term goals might be good, but not as much long-term. But as they get older, having them to start thinking more long-term, and that the benefits of a longer process, as adults, there's the momentary gratifications, that we work through all the time. But a lot of times the things that matter most are things that are built over a long period of time. Relationships, careers, wealth, whatever that might be, are things that we have to work towards. And those are things that it's very hard to get those overnight. And those are things that are built over a long period of time. So as they get older, having those goals be set, one of the funny things, we've run into this multiple times, because we're big time planners, where we have done our 5-year plan, right? And our 10-year plan. And we've been through 2 10-year plan cycles. And I remember the first time we got through that first cycle, we were like, there was moments where we said, well, what's next?
Yeah, what do we do next?
What do we do now? It's like,
what's the next plan?
We've reached the first one. And like, oh my gosh, now we have to start thinking about it. We got to start talking about it. I think understanding those long-term goals, and the steps, the small steps that you have to take to get to those goals, I think is something that we need to start to slowly work our children into.
And I think, like you say, modeling goal setting is great for the youngers, but I also think even young, they can set goals. They're just right-sized goals, right?
Yeah.
For our oldest, she's got a goal that she really wants to address. That's her goal. She really wants to sew herself a dress.
She really wants to sew a Ren Fair dress one day.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. She wants to sew fancy dresses. But so I said to her, okay, if that's your goal, well, let's work on it. Maybe first you can sew like a skirt. And once you've sewn a skirt and that goes okay, maybe you can try to do a shirt, and then maybe you can try. And we talked about it. Like, now I don't know if she's going to execute that whole thing, but we've talked about like, how would she get to that thing she wants to do? We've had conversations like that about sports. Had conversations with our 5-year-old where she wants to play piano, and it's like, okay, well, this is what you want to do. Like, let's set a goal. We got this little piano book. Let's set a goal that we finish the book this year. You can help them with the goal. It doesn't have to be a big thing.
Yeah, it's not something you kind of dump into their lap and expect them to do it.
No, not
a lot
at
of
all.
times with these actions, I've seen this a lot of times with some of the curriculum stuff, especially with math. You need to really explicitly show them what to do. You need to, even reading as well, explicit instructions, very systematic. Show them what they have to do, help them learn how to do that, help them do it, and then they can do it on their own. A lot of times these things, sometimes we're guilty of assuming they're older than they are, or treating them more like adults, because we want to treat them like adults. We want to talk to them like adults. We want them to.
Our daughter's huge, so sometimes I think she's an adult. I'm like, oh wait, an adult. No, still 9.
But treating them like adults, sometimes we then put those expectations. I know I'm guilty of it. I'm like, come on, kid, let's do it. And we're like, oh no, you're 5. It's like, no, I got to help you know exactly what to do. I got to show you. I can't just tell you how to do it.
But I think that right size goal setting is great. Even from an early age, whatever it is. And then you help them along. You show them how to do it, or you do it with them, even better, right? And until they reach the minor goal that they have, right? And then they get that sense of accomplishment from having achieved something.
Another thing, something you've been doing a lot of lately is journaling and talking and sketching through your ideas.
Journaling has been so helpful. We've been trying to get our older daughter more comfortable with it. She's still kind of hesitant, like we're going to read it or something. We keep telling her, we're not going to read it. This is just for you. This is just for you. But I think journaling is really great because it's a way to process and think, and it helps them think about what they're interested in and what they want to learn and what they want to do and who they want to be and all those things. And so we're trying to encourage that journaling. I think it's a great tool.
Yeah, as a way to get their thoughts down onto paper and think ahead and maybe even plan some goals.
Yeah, totally.
And even to log their progress along the way. That's something that fancy term that I've heard a few times now is metacognition. So it's like there's a way that you think, but then very rarely do we step above that and try to analyze how we think and how we learn, and maybe make tweaks at that kind of system level. A lot of times we're trying to like, I got to learn new things and everything and blah, blah, blah. Very rarely do we step back and say, am I doing this the right way? Do I need to put in a different system, or do I need to approach this in a different way? Am I learning in the way that best suits me? Journaling and trying to analyze your thinking process is a great way to kind of tweak and hone your critical thinking, your mindset, how you approach things, how you want to commit yourself. As a big procrastinator, one of the hard things for me is like, okay, put my head down and actually study and put the work in and come back to things and cycle back all the time on some type of skill or thing that I'm learning. It's hard for me to do that. And so a lot of times I have to kind of step up and say, hey, you promised yourself that you were going to do this a better way. You're not just going to, just plug and chug and, pump and dump like you normally do. You're going to try and do this better going forward. Analyzing your thinking, journaling and sketching and planning and all those type of writing activities is a great way for us to try to get our students to start to think about how they're thinking.
Yeah, well, and I think it naturally happens. I've been journaling all year. I've never really done a lot of journaling before, but I've noticed that anytime I'm just like struggling to figure something out, I end up journaling about it, and it just helps me kind of process how, I'm struggling with how I'm going to do XYZ thing. Okay, well, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. It's somewhere to bounce ideas off of that's just private, right? And encouraging our kids to be able to have that private space if they want to. Our youngest daughter's huge into drawing, and she's big into sketching, and big time. And that's a way to pursue her interests as well. The things that she's interested in, she draws, and she's really into that, and that's awesome. So
absolutely.
Hopefully these give you some ideas. it gave us some food for thought too about like how we can ensure that we are, raising our daughters to be lifelong learners, because it's a lot of it sounds easier, and in the moment can sometimes be hard to be positive, to show that curiosity, all the things we talked about today. So it's good food for thought for us as well, and reminders to keep on going, because it's definitely worth it. Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
happy homeschooling!